The day I signed my divorce papers, my ex-husband froze every account tied to my name. Yeah. Every single one. He probably pictured me collapsing on the courthouse steps, mascara streaked, hands shaking, begging him to undo it. That was always his favorite fantasy, me helpless, him almighty. Julian Croft, king of the glass tower. Me, the decorative wife who existed only in his shadow. Too bad for him, that wasn't the story unfolding. See, what Julian never understood, not in 8 years of marriage, was that I'd been quietly preparing for this exact moment since the day I moved into his penthouse. While he thought I was learning table settings and charity event smiles, I was learning survival. Strategy. Patience. Today wasn't the day my life collapsed. It was the day I tightened the trap. My name is Evelyn Reed. I'm 32 years old. For 7 years, I was the perfect stay-at-home wife, no career, no income, no voice. The kind of woman society loves to pity. The kind men like Julian assume can't breathe without permission. But here's the truth, for 8 years, I was threading a net, strand by strand, invisible enough that even the man standing in the center of it never noticed. And today? I pulled it closed. We finalized everything at the county clerk's office just after 9 in the morning. He'd rushed the whole thing, impatient as always, checking his watch between signatures like divorcing me was just another meeting he needed to squeeze in before lunch. The moment we stepped outside, sunlight hit the marble steps, bright and sharp. Julian didn't even look at me. He was already dialing his wealth manager. Freeze all shared accounts immediately, he said, loud enough for me to hear. Yes, everything linked to Evelyn Reed. Effective now. I lowered my gaze at exactly the right second. Inside, though? I almost smiled. Because right then, at that exact moment, the first domino of his collapse tipped forward. He hung up and finally turned to me. That familiar smile spread across his face, the one he used when he thought he'd won. The same smile he wore when he'd humiliate me at dinner parties, or remind me I didn't contribute. Well, he said, sliding his sunglasses on, from this point on, you don't have a dime to your name. I let my lips part slightly. Shock. Fear. A flicker of panic. Years of practice made the expression effortless. Julian, what are you talking about? My voice cracked on cue. Hook. Line. Sinker. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was sharing a delicious secret. I've already had the penthouse locks changed. Your things are with the doorman. And that debit card? Frozen yesterday. Payment apps too. You're officially broke. He paused, studying my face like a critic enjoying theater. How are you gonna live now? He went on. Crash with your parents? Beg? Maybe I'll toss you a few thousand if you ask nicely. A clerk nearby glanced over, curiosity and pity mixing in her eyes. Perfect audience. Julian loved an audience. I dropped my gaze, shoulders folding inward just enough. The defeated wife. The discarded woman. The one with nowhere to go. Exactly the role he needed me to play. Because as he stood there savoring my supposed ruin, he had no idea that for 8 years, I'd been learning to disappear in plain sight. Learning to save without being seen. Learning his business habits, his weaknesses, his pride. He thought he'd just wiped me out. What he'd really done was press start on his own downfall. And as I stood there trembling on the courthouse steps, clutching those thin red divorce papers, I knew something he didn't. I wasn't the one leaving with nothing. I was the one walking away with everything that mattered. I left the courthouse on foot. Not because I had to, but because optics matter. Julian expected me to scramble for a cab, maybe call a friend in tears, maybe stand there frozen like my world had just ended. Instead, I did something quieter, sadder looking. I pulled my coat tighter around me and walked into the late morning Manhattan glare like a woman who had nowhere to be and no one to call. It's funny how fast people decide who you are. 2 blocks down, I stopped at a bus shelter and sat on the cold metal bench. I opened my palm and counted the cash I'd prepared the night before, a wrinkled 20, a 10, 3 singles, and coins. $33. I made sure anyone nearby could see me count it twice. Prop work matters. An older woman selling scratch tickets glanced over. Rough day, huh, honey? I gave her a small, embarrassed smile. Yeah. Something like that. She nodded with the weary authority of someone who'd seen every version of loss. You'll land on your feet. Just takes time. Thank you, I said softly. I'd been hearing lines like that for years, neighbors, relatives, Julian's colleagues' wives. Comfort meant for the powerless. I knew exactly how to accept it, chin lowered, gratitude without details. It discouraged questions. A city bus hissed to a stop. I paid in cash and walked all the way to the back. The seat vinyl was cracked, the air heavy with heat and perfume and exhaustion. Perfect. I leaned my head against the window and let the city blur past. Inside my mind, timelines clicked into place. 3 hours from now, Julian's finance team would receive the first liquidity discrepancy report. 6 hours after that, an upstate client would call about delayed funds. By tomorrow morning, rumors would start drifting through investor channels like smoke. I didn't need speed. I needed synchronization. The bus reached its final stop near the industrial edge of the city. I got off, pulling a scuffed suitcase I'd planted there 2 days earlier. Inside, a few thrift store clothes, cheap flats, 2 notebooks, and nothing else. The luggage of a woman starting from zero. The alley I turned into looked exactly how I needed it to: flickering neon, dented dumpsters, auto shops, the smell of grease and old rain. The kind of place respectable people believe collapse leads to. Anonymity has a texture. This was it. My building superintendent opened the door before I even knocked. He scanned me, suitcase, tired eyes, courthouse envelope still visible in my hand. Just you? He asked. Yes, I said. Deposits 1 month. Bathroom shared. No trouble. I handed him folded cash. He counted it slowly, then shrugged. Rooms upstairs. Holler if you need anything. Need. The word almost made me laugh. The room was exactly as advertised: narrow metal bed frame, sagging mattress, yellowing bulb, 1 fan whining in the corner. No art. No softness. No history. I set my suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed. Then I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Long enough for any curious neighbor to report, new divorced lady moved in, looks broke. Only after that did I reach beneath the lining of my suitcase and pull out the second phone, sleek, charged, untraceable. The real one. I dialed. Maya picked up on the first ring. Report. Just like predicted, I said. He froze everything. And the backups? Operational? All 3 shell accounts untouched, she replied. Funds secure. Upstate client already sent an inquiry email. Don't respond, I said. Let the anxiety build. Copy. I ended the call and powered the phone down again, sliding it back into hiding. Then I lay back on the thin mattress and stared at the stained ceiling. Outside, someone argued in Spanish. A truck backfired. Somewhere a radio played old hip-hop through static. To anyone else, this place was rock bottom. To me? It was stage lighting. Because Julian Croft believed he'd pushed me into the gutter. He didn't realize I'd chosen the alley. And tonight, as he celebrated his clean financial break, he had no clue that the first fractures were already spidering through the empire he thought he controlled. I closed my eyes and let a slow smile form in the dark. The story the world saw was simple: rich husband, discarded wife, sudden poverty. But the truth? I wasn't the victim crawling out of his life. I was the architect dismantling it. The first thing you learn when you disappear is how loud silence actually is. No marble floors echoing your steps. No elevator chime announcing arrival at a penthouse level. No espresso machine hissing like a tiny dragon in the kitchen at dawn. Just the cheap fan rattling in the corner and pipes knocking behind the walls like the building itself had arthritis. I woke up before sunrise anyway. Old habits. Or maybe predator instincts, never sleep too long when the hunt's in motion. For a few seconds, I lay still, letting the room settle around me. The mattress springs pressed through the fabric. My shoulder ached. Somewhere down the hall, someone coughed that deep, smoker's cough that sounds permanent. Perfect sensory confirmation, yes, I was exactly where I needed to be. Then I switched roles. I sat up slowly, rubbed my eyes, and whispered to the empty room, okay, you got this. Anyone overhearing would have heard a newly dumped woman psyching herself up to survive day one. Performance matters even when the audience is imaginary. I shuffled to the sink at the end of the hall, carrying a cracked plastic toothbrush cup I'd bought for 99 cents. A woman in a robe glanced at me, eyes flicking to my courthouse envelope tucked under my arm like a life preserver. New? She asked. I nodded, giving a tight smile. Yeah. Just starting over. She softened instantly. Men are trash, honey. I let out a breathy laugh. Yeah. Guess so. Bond formed. Narrative reinforced. Witness secured. Back in my room, door closed, I moved fast. Suitcase lining up. Phone out. Power on. 3 messages from Maya. Maya, liquidity team flagged delay. Maya, Julian requested internal audit review. Maya, upstate client threatening withdrawal if unresolved in 24H. Right on schedule. I typed back, escalate tension. No resolution yet. Dots appeared. Then, you're evil. I love it. I smirked and powered the phone off again. Then I reached for the second prop, my old wedding ring set. Not the real diamonds, those were locked away months ago, but the visually identical replicas I'd had commissioned. Same cut, same weight, same sparkle under fluorescent light. I slid them onto my finger and held my hand up. To an outsider, it looked like I hadn't had the heart to take them off yet. To me, they were a fuse. Because grief jewelry tells a story faster than words. It signals recent loss, lingering attachment, financial decline. The kind of woman who might pawn them soon. Exactly the rumor I needed drifting through this neighborhood. I tucked my hair into a messy knot, put on thrift store jeans and a faded hoodie, and headed outside with a tote bag. Destination, the corner pawn shop 2 blocks down. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped in. Glass cases. Fluorescent hum. Security camera dome in the ceiling corner. The owner looked up from behind the counter, gaze dropping instantly to my left hand. Hook set. I approached slowly, hesitation written into every step. Hi. He nodded. What you got? I swallowed, eyes darting like I hated myself for being here. Then I slid the ring off and placed it on the glass. My ex just, I trailed off, shaking my head. I just need enough for rent. He picked it up, loop to eye. Nice piece. I nodded, lips pressed tight. He named a number. Low. Insultingly low. Perfect. I let my face crumble. That's all? Market's down, he shrugged. Take it or leave it. I stared at the ring like it held my entire past. Then, with visible pain, I nodded. Okay. Transaction complete. Receipt printed. Ring gone. He'd sell it within days. Word would travel, wealthy divorcee unloading diamonds cheap. By evening, the story would exist independently of me. Outside, I stepped into sunlight and exhaled. 1 pawned ring, negligible cash, enormous narrative yield. I walked back toward the building slowly, shoulders slumped for anyone watching. Inside? My mind ticked through cascading effects. Julian's team would hear whispers of my financial distress. Investors would assume the divorce settlement had gutted me. Sympathy would tilt toward him, the stable one, the solvent one. Which meant when his accounts started wobbling publicly, no one would suspect me. They'd assume coincidence. Mismanagement. Bad luck. Anything but the broke ex-wife in a shared bath walk-up. I climbed the stairs, every step echoing hollow metal. Stage set. Costume secured. Rumor seated. And somewhere across the city, Julian Croft was walking into his glass office tower believing he'd erased me. He hadn't. He'd just moved me off stage. And the most dangerous players? We operate best in the dark. By noon, the pawn shop story had already outpaced me. That's the thing about neighborhoods like this, information moves faster than Wi-Fi and sticks harder than fact. By the time I came back from the bodega with a plastic bag of instant noodles and a dented can of soup, 2 separate tenants had already given me the same look, pity mixed with recognition. Translation: that's the divorce lady who pawned her ring. I kept my eyes down and climbed the stairs. Halfway up, the robed woman from the sink leaned out of her doorway. "Hey," she called softly. "You okay?" I gave the exact pause grief requires, long enough to seem honest, short enough to avoid conversation. "Yeah," I said. "Just figuring stuff out." She nodded, satisfied. "You'll be all right." "Seen worse." "Thanks," I murmured, and kept climbing. Witness number 2 confirmed. Inside my room, door locked, posture changed instantly. Shoulders back. Jaw set. Brain online. Phone out. Power on. Maya had sent screenshots. Internal thread, Croft Capital Liquidity Desk. Subject: urgent, upstate client escalation. Client requesting same-day wire confirmation. Funds currently in transfer hold. CFO notified. Julian CC'd. I read it twice, feeling that precise, clinical satisfaction only architects know when structures begin to shift exactly where calculated. I typed, delay response 3H. Then partial reassurance only. Maya, you're playing Jenga with a skyscraper. Exactly. Phone off. Hidden again. I ate noodles sitting on the bed, slurping loudly enough that anyone passing my door would hear poverty lunch acoustics. Sound design matters. Rich people chew quietly. Broke people eat like survival. Then came phase 2 of today's optics. I pulled out the courthouse envelope and slid the divorce papers halfway free so the header showed. Legal stamps catch eyes. Authority makes stories believable. I tucked it under my arm and headed back outside. Destination: laundromat. Not because I needed clean clothes. Because laundromats are rumor exchanges with fluorescent lighting. Machines clanked. Soap smell thick in the air. A TV bolted to the wall played daytime court shows, ironic symmetry. I chose a machine near the center, dumped in my thrift store clothes, and sat where the envelope was clearly visible. It took 4 minutes. A woman folding towels glanced down. Divorce? I let my throat tighten. Nodded. Mine was hell, she said. Took everything. I gave a weak laugh. Yeah. Same. Hook deeper. Men with money are the worst, she added. I stared at the spinning washer. He said I'd be fine, I whispered. That I'd land on my feet. Her snort carried across 3 machines. They always say that. We shared the universal sisterhood of perceived abandonment. Narrative sealed. By the time my cycle finished, 5 people had seen the envelope, 3 had heard the story, and at least 1 would repeat it outside this room. Information ecology established. I returned to the building mid-afternoon and paused at the mailboxes. Mine was empty, of course. No one sends letters to women who vanish overnight. But I lingered anyway, flipping through junk mail like someone hoping for rescue. Superintendent watching from the hall, audience secured. I sighed, shoulders collapsing, and trudged upstairs. Inside, door locked, spine straightened again. Clock check, 3:42 p.m. Right now, in a glass conference room 23 floors above Manhattan, Julian would be seated at the head of a table, sleeves rolled, jaw tight, finance team arrayed around him. Someone would be explaining that a major client wanted liquidity confirmation that didn't exist yet. Someone else would mention temporary transfer holds. And Julian, my meticulous, control-addicted, optics-obsessed husband, would feel the first real sensation he hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. Not loss. Not yet. Just a hairline crack in certainty. I lay back on the mattress and closed my eyes, mapping his reaction step by step. He'd tighten procedures. Demand reports. Authorize internal reviews. Project calm externally. Which meant the pressure would redirect inward, onto systems already primed to fail. Exactly as designed. Outside my window, sirens passed, Doppler fading into distance. The city kept moving, oblivious to the quietest financial demolition in progress. And somewhere inside that polished tower, Julian Croft still believed the story he'd authored. Wife gone. Assets safe. Reputation intact. He had no idea that across the river of glass and steel, the woman he'd written off as collateral damage was sitting on a sagging mattress in a rented room, eating instant noodles. And tightening the invisible wires around his empire. Smoke first. Then fire. By the second morning, the building treated me like I'd always been poor. That's how fast status evaporates when you remove the signals: no tailored coats, no leather heels, no doorman saying your name. Just a woman in worn sneakers brushing her teeth at a shared sink. The transition was seamless, almost elegant in its brutality. Exactly what I wanted. I leaned over the basin, scrubbing too hard, eyes red enough to pass for crying. The robe woman, Carla, I'd learned, patted my shoulder on her way out. You eating? She asked. Trying, I said, voice thin. She nodded, satisfied, and left. Another reinforcement of the narrative: fragile, abandoned, barely coping. Back in my room, the door clicked shut and the performance dropped like a mask hitting a table. Phone out. On. 5 messages from Maya this time. Maya, CFO initiated internal liquidity sweep. Maya, 2 mid-tier clients requested status calls. Maya, upstate client issued 12H ultimatum. Maya, Julian cancelled lunch meeting. Maya, he's rattled. I exhaled slowly, savoring the word. Rattled. For a man like Julian, that wasn't emotion, it was structural damage. He'd built his life on anticipation and control. Markets moved because he predicted them. People obeyed because he outmaneuvered them. Chaos was something he monetized, never experienced. Until now. I typed, release partial transfer to smallest client. Deny others. Maya replied instantly, divide and panic. Got it. Exactly. In finance, nothing spreads fear faster than selective solvency. If one client gets funds while others wait, the message is clear: liquidity exists, but not enough. I powered the phone down and slid it away. Today's optics phase required escalation. I opened my tote and pulled out the last prop from my previous life, a silk blouse. Real. Designer. Recognizable quality. I wrinkled it deliberately, then tucked it under my arm with 2 cheap garments. Destination, thrift store on 8th. The bell chimed as I stepped in. Racks crowded tight, air smelling of dust and detergent. A volunteer at the counter looked up. Donations? She asked. I nodded, swallowing. Yeah. I can't keep everything. Her eyes dropped to the blouse immediately. Even crumpled, it radiated cost. Oh honey, she said softly. You sure? I gave the exact broken laugh of someone shedding a former life. No point holding on to things that don't fit anymore. Truth, layered. She took it gently. We'll make sure someone who needs it gets it. I nodded, eyes wet. Transaction complete, symbol of lost wealth publicly surrendered. As I turned to leave, two shoppers watched me with that unmistakable mix of curiosity and compassion. They'd tell the story later: she donated expensive clothes, must have been rich before. Rumor evolution achieved, not just broke, but formerly affluent and fallen. Outside, sunlight hit my face. I breathed in the city, diesel, bread, hot metal, and let satisfaction flicker through me. Back in Julian's world, the controlled burn was spreading. By now, one client had quietly received funds. Two had not. Calls would multiply. Assistants would whisper. Analysts would speculate in Slack channels they thought leadership never read. And Julian, methodical, proud Julian, would be forced into reactive mode. I returned to the building mid-afternoon carrying only the cheap clothes I'd kept. Carla saw them and winced. You gave stuff away? I nodded. Needed the space. She shook her head. You're too good. If she only knew. Inside my room, I shut the door and leaned against it, eyes closed, mapping the financial topology again. Liquidity pressure, client anxiety, reputation risk, accelerated withdrawals, forced asset movement. Every step predictable. Every step nudged. I pulled out the phone one more time and sent a single instruction. Initiate rumor, marital settlement drained personal reserves. Maya's reply, cold. Yes. Because the more the industry believed I'd been financially gutted in the divorce, the less anyone would consider that I still had leverage. Or access. Or motive. I lay back on the mattress, staring at the ceiling stain shaped vaguely like a continent. Somewhere across Manhattan, Julian was likely standing at his office window, phone pressed to ear, voice low and controlled while tension crept into his jaw. He'd think this was market turbulence. Operational friction. Temporary. He wouldn't see the pattern yet. But patterns are patient. And fires set carefully don't roar at first. They smolder. They travel unseen through beams and insulation. They weaken the structure from within. Until the day the glass finally cracks. By day 3, the building had stopped looking at me. Which, paradoxically, meant I'd fully arrived. Pity is loud at first, questions, casseroles, sympathetic tilts of the head. But once someone is categorized as permanently unfortunate, attention fades. You become background texture, the divorce lady in 3B, the one with the cheap tote and tired eyes. Invisibility achieved. I moved through the morning routine slowly, letting anyone who crossed my path see the same quiet deterioration, hair unwashed, shoulders rounded, steps hesitant. Carla offered me half a bagel in the hall. I accepted with embarrassed gratitude. Optics reinforced. Inside, however, the air felt electric. I shut the door, turned the lock, and pulled the real phone from its hiding place. On. 8 messages. Maya, 2 denied clients escalated to legal review. Maya, industry chatter started. Maya, someone leaked temporary liquidity constraints. Maya, Julian called emergency partner meeting. Maya, he's blaming ops. Maya, CFO pushing back. Maya, tension high. Maya, you're inside his head now. I sat on the bed, pulse steady but elevated, the calm edge right before a structural shift. This was the moment I'd modeled repeatedly, when external pressure meets internal hierarchy. Organizations don't fracture at the bottom. They crack where authority overlaps. Julian versus his CFO. Control versus reality. Perfect. I typed, authorize second partial release to different mid-tier client. Maya, not the loudest? No. The respected one. Because panic spreads fastest when credible players move first. If a cautious, well-regarded client receives funds while others stall, the signal is devastating: insiders prioritized, outsiders exposed. I added, delay confirmations 2H. Let rumor outrun fact. Maya, you're terrifying. I powered the phone down, sliding it away. Then I reached for today's final optic escalation, job search. Nothing cements perceived collapse like employment descent. I pulled on my thrift store hoodie and walked 3 blocks to a strip of storefronts where faded help wanted signs lived permanently in windows. Laundromat. Deli. Nail salon. The kind of work people assume you fall into after losing everything else. I chose the deli. Bell chimed. Smell of frying oil and coffee. A man behind the counter looked up. Yeah? I held up the sign. You still hiring? He scanned me, age, posture, education ghost still clinging despite my costume. Experience? I hesitated just enough. Office stuff mostly. But I learn fast. He shrugged. Part-time. Cash. Early mornings. I nodded eagerly. That's fine. He handed me a paper form and a pen chewed nearly in half. I filled it out at a sticky table, handwriting deliberately less polished than my own. Name real. History vague. Skills minimal. He took it back. I call if need. Thank you, I said, relief flooding my face. Transaction complete, fallen social tier confirmed. As I left, 2 customers watched me, their expressions already assembling the story. Educated woman reduced to deli shifts. Divorce fallout. Tragic but common. Exactly. Back on the street, sunlight glared off glass towers in the distance, the skyline where Julian's office pierced the sky like certainty itself. I paused just long enough to look small against it. Then I walked on. Inside the building, Carla caught me on the stairs. You find work? I nodded. Maybe. Deli down the block. Her face softened into full maternal pity. Proud of you. I gave a fragile smile. Inside my room, door locked, the smile sharpened. Clock check, 2:18 p.m. Right now, Croft Capital's partner meeting would be underway. Voices tight. Data projected. CFO presenting liquidity gaps. Julian countering with authority. Partners calculating exposure. And somewhere in that room, the unspoken question would finally surface. Is this mismanagement, or something worse? That's when fault lines appear, not in numbers, but in trust. I lay back, staring at the ceiling. 3 days ago, Julian believed he'd excised me cleanly from his life, legal, financial, reputational amputation complete. Now? His firm was whispering about liquidity. Clients were anxious. Partners were uneasy. And I was in a rented room above a cracked hallway, possibly hired at a deli, eating half a donated bagel. While the foundations of his empire shifted millimeters at a time. Collapse never begins with noise. It begins with alignment. Pressure applied in the right places. At the right intervals. Until one morning, the structure wakes up already broken. The call came at 6:12 a.m. Which, in my old life, would have meant a market crisis somewhere overseas. Currency swing. Political shock. Something large enough to justify dawn intrusion into Julian Croft's orbit. Now it was just my prepaid burner vibrating against a chipped nightstand in a rented room that smelled faintly of mildew and instant coffee. I let it ring twice before answering. Yeah? My voice carried sleep and strain. Maya didn't bother with greeting. It's happening. I sat up, heart rate snapping instantly into that clean, razor-alert rhythm I'd trained into myself years ago. Level? Public, she said. Not full exposure. But leak confirmed. My spine straightened. Source? Industry newsletter. Mid-tier circulation but respected. Headline: Croft Capital experiencing liquidity strain amid client withdrawal pressure. There it was. The first visible crack in glass. I swung my legs off the bed, feet hitting cold linoleum. Timing? Dropped 9 minutes ago. Markets open in 28. Perfect overlap. Maximum visibility. Minimum response window. I stood and crossed to the window, really just a rectangle of gray morning between buildings, and let myself breathe once. Years of modeling. Months of setup. Days of pressure. And now? Reality matching projection. What's his move? I asked. Emergency statement drafted, Maya said. Internal only so far. Claims temporary settlement delays. I smiled faintly. Classic Julian, minimize, contain, project control. Clients? 3 requesting calls before open. 1 already pulling additional funds. Acceleration phase. I closed my eyes briefly, visualizing Croft Capital's liquidity map, the flows, buffers, choke points. Every artery I'd studied while still his wife. Every vulnerability I'd archived quietly. Authorized third partial, I said. Largest denied client. Maya exhaled sharply. That flips perception. Yes, I said. From strain to selective solvency. Meaning, they have money, but not for everyone. The most dangerous narrative in finance. Do it, she said. I ended the call and stood still in the dim room, feeling something I hadn't allowed yet. Satisfaction. Not gloating. Not revenge. Precision achieved. Outside, someone clanged a metal trash lid. Pipes thudded in the walls. The building woke to another ordinary, struggling day. Across Manhattan, though, glass towers were lighting up with emails carrying Julian's name beside the word liquidity. I pulled on yesterday's hoodie and stepped into the hall. Carla was already at the sink, curling iron in hand. You're up early, she said. Job thing, I murmured. Trial shift. Her face lit with encouragement. See? Told you you'd land. I gave a nervous nod. Narrative sustained even as his unraveled. On the street, dawn was cold and blue. I walked past the deli, closed still, metal gate down, and continued to the corner where news boxes stood. One carried the financial circular Maya mentioned. I fed coins and pulled a copy free. There it was on page 3. Croft Capital experiencing liquidity strain. Julian's firm. Julian's name. Julian's control myth, publicly questioned for the first time in 20 years. I traced the headline lightly with my thumb. Not destroyed. Not disgraced. Just cracked. Exactly as planned. I folded the paper and tucked it under my arm like any anxious ex-wife tracking her former husband's decline. Anyone seeing me would read it as lingering attachment. They'd never read strategy. Back in my room, I laid the paper on the bed and sat beside it. Somewhere right now, Julian would be in his office before sunrise, tie crooked, jaw locked, rereading the article while his team scrambled. Phones ringing. Assistants whispering. Screens flashing red with withdrawal requests. He'd feel it, not loss yet, but something more unfamiliar. Loss of inevitability. For the first time, his empire's future wouldn't feel guaranteed. And he'd search for causes, markets, staff, competitors. He would not search the rented room of his discarded wife. Because the story he believed was still intact. She's broke. She's gone. She's irrelevant. I lay back beside the newspaper and stared at the ceiling. The first shatter is always small. A sound only those listening for it can hear. But once glass remembers how to break, it never forgets. By mid-morning, the city was already humming with it. You could feel financial rumor the way you feel weather before rain, pressure change, air thickening, conversations tilting toward a single name. Even down here, 6 subway stops and several social classes removed from glass towers, Croft Capital had entered the bloodstream. I was at the deli counter pretending to learn the register when the owner's radio crackled with market news. Numbers, firms, analysts talking fast. Then, questions emerging around Croft Capital's short-term liquidity position. I let my hand slip on purpose, coins scattering across the counter. Sorry, I muttered, dropping to gather them. The owner grunted. You good? Yeah, I said softly. Just, long week. He nodded, already bored. But the other clerk, a kid maybe 20, looked at me, then at the radio, then back. Recognition flickered. Not of me, but of narrative alignment, divorced woman, rich ex-husband in trouble. Hooks everywhere now. I finished the shift simulation, really just 30 minutes of fumbling with receipts, then stepped outside into hard sunlight. I pulled the folded financial circular from my tote and stood on the corner reading it again like someone unable to let go. 2 passersby glanced. 1 lingered half a second. Witnesses multiply stories. Back in the room, door locked, phone out. On. Maya had sent a cascade. Maya, largest client partial confirmed. Maya, denied clients furious. Maya, 2 withdrawal notices filed. Maya, partner group split on messaging. Maya, Julian on calls nonstop. Maya, markets reacting mild but watching. Maya, you're in aftershock phase. Yes. Aftershocks, the period where damage spreads faster than the initial fracture. I typed, leak internal memo excerpt. Just enough. Maya, that's nuclear. No. Nuclear is insolvency. This is smoke in hallways. 3 dots. Then, you're ice. I set the phone aside without replying. Because she was wrong about one thing. Ice is brittle. I was something else entirely. I stood and crossed to the mirror nailed crooked above the dresser. The woman staring back looked convincingly worn, shadows under eyes, hair dull, hoodie stretched. I lifted my left hand. Bare finger. Pond ring absence now part of the mythology. I pressed that finger briefly to the glass. Still invisible, I murmured. Exactly where power lives. Across the river, though, Julian was becoming hypervisible. Every client call, every market whisper, every analyst note tightening focus on him. Visibility is pressure. Pressure is error. I returned to the bed and unfolded the paper again, scanning the language like a surgeon reviewing imaging. Words mattered. Tone mattered. And the article carried that precise blend I'd aimed for. Concern without conclusion. Doubt without proof. Enough to destabilize trust. My phone buzzed, new message. Maya, memo fragment circulating. Attribution unclear. Chaos rising. I closed my eyes. There it was. Internal voice made external. Nothing collapses institutions faster than their own words escaping. I replied, hold all releases 4H. Let panic crest. Because aftershocks peak when systems pause, when stakeholders fill silence with fear. I powered the phone down and lay back. Through the thin wall, someone laughed loudly at a TV sitcom. Pipes clanged. A child ran down the hall. Ordinary life continued, indifferent to financial tectonics. And Julian? Right now he'd be shifting from control to defense. Statements drafted. Lawyers looped. Partners demanding clarity. CFO insisting numbers. He'd still believe recovery was possible. He wouldn't yet feel inevitability reversing. But it was. I rolled onto my side, facing the window slit of gray sky. 8 days ago, he'd handed me divorce papers believing he'd sealed outcomes, kept wealth, kept firm, kept reputation. Now all 3 were vibrating. And the world still saw me as the woman who'd pawned her ring and taken a deli job after being discarded. The safest disguise ever invented. Irrelevance. Aftershocks don't announce themselves. They ripple outward, toppling structures already weakened, one support at a time. I closed my eyes, listening to the building breathe. Somewhere far above, glass towers gleamed in sun. Hairline fractures spreading through them, invisible to everyone. Except the one who'd placed them. The second article hit just after lunch. I was in the laundromat again, same machine row, same plastic chair, same courthouse envelope folded visibly beside me like a relic I couldn't discard. Routine builds credibility. If people see you doing the same sad things in the same sad places, your story hardens into fact. The TV bolted to the wall had switched from court shows to financial news. Normally no one here cared. Today, 3 heads turned at once when the ticker crawled across the bottom. Croft Capital faces growing liquidity questions. I froze mid-fold. Performance before instinct. A woman across from me squinted at the screen, then at me, recognition snapping into place. Wasn't that your? She stopped herself, polite reflex colliding with gossip impulse. I let my mouth tighten. Yeah, I said quietly. Sympathy detonated instantly. Oh honey. I shook my head, eyes glassy. I don't want to talk about it. That's the line that guarantees everyone will. I gathered my clothes too fast, dropping a sock. Hand shaking just enough. Envelope clutched like a shield. I fled toward the door, shoulders caved. Behind me, whispers ignited. By the time I reached the street, my breathing had steadied completely. Vector established, public association between his crisis and my collapse. Exactly what I needed circulating. Back in my room, door locked, mask gone. Phone on. Maya had already sent it. Financial Sentinel, special update. Croft Capital liquidity concerns deepen as clients seek clarity. More pointed than the first. Analyst quotes. Anonymous client worry. Language edging toward systemic. Good. I typed, who fed Sentinel? Maya, not us. Competitor likely. They smell blood. Of course they did. Markets are sharks. Once water clouds, everyone bites. Which meant phase dynamics were accelerating beyond my inputs. I leaned back against the wall, thinking fast. When predators converge, structures fail faster, but control decreases. I needed pressure without collapse. Not yet. I typed, stabilize smallest denied client. Quietly. Maya, you're easing? No. Shaping. Too fast failure absolves him. Gradual erosion indicts him. Because if Croft Capital imploded overnight, narrative would be shock event. Market anomaly. Bad luck. But a prolonged unraveling? That becomes leadership failure. Julian's failure. Maya, God. You really loved him once, huh? I stared at that line. Once, yes. Before love turned into audit trails and contingency planning. Before I realized the man who controlled everything also controlled me. I didn't answer. Instead, monitor partner chatter. Any fracture, amplify doubt not panic. Maya, understood. Phone off. I sat there a long moment, the hum of the building pressing in. Somewhere a blender word. Someone argued in the hall. Life's small chaos wrapped around me like insulation. Across Manhattan, though, chaos was no longer small. Second article meant credibility shift. Journalists don't double hit without sourcing. Investors would read this as pattern, not rumor. Calls would intensify. Withdrawals multiply. Internal blame sharpen. Exposure vectors widening. I stood and crossed to the mirror again. Still the same woman, worn hoodie, tired eyes, bare ring finger. Perfectly unthreatening. Perfectly dismissed. I practiced the look one more time, the flinch when hearing his firm's name. The swallowed tears. The silent endurance. Then I let it fall away. Because somewhere right now, Julian would be reading the second article, pulse rising for the first time beyond annoyance into something colder. Fear. Not of loss yet. Of losing control. And he would scan the landscape for threats, competitors, regulators, markets. He would not scan a laundromat full of plastic chairs. He would not scan the ex-wife who pawned her ring. He would not see the exposure vectors radiating outward from a single decision he'd made casually, confidently, 8 days ago. Discard her. I lay back on the mattress, arms folded behind my head. The ceiling stain looked bigger today. Or maybe the room was shrinking. Either way, across the river, glass was under stress. And stress, applied long enough, always finds a way through. The knock came just after dusk. 3 short taps. Hesitation. 2 more. Not landlord. Not Carla. Wrong rhythm. I froze halfway through stirring instant soup, senses snapping sharp. No one here knocked on my door unless something broke or someone needed cigarettes. The taps came again. Yeah? I called, voice thin, wary. It's me, Carla said. You decent? I exhaled once and opened the door a crack. She stood there holding a grocery bag, expression tight in a way I hadn't seen before. Not pity. Not casual kindness. Concern. For you, she said, pushing the bag into my hands. Canned beans, bread, cheap coffee. Figured you could use it. My throat worked. Performance rising automatically. You don't have to. I know, she said. But take it. I nodded, eyes wet, and stepped back so she could see the room: bare mattress, paper cup, folded newspaper on the bed with Croft Capital's name visible. I hadn't even planted it today. It was simply there now, like gravity. Her gaze landed on it. Then on me. That him? She asked quietly. I hesitated just long enough. Yeah. She blew out a breath. They're talking about it downstairs. News said his company's in trouble. I swallowed. I don't know anything. Truth, technically. She studied me a moment longer, then squeezed my arm. Karma's real. And there it was, the external narrative locking into its final shape. He wronged her. He's falling. Justice. I let a tear slip. She hugged me once, hard, then left. Door closed. Mask dropped. Because if neighbors were discussing Croft Capital, containment had failed citywide. Media saturation phase. I crossed to the bed, grabbed the paper, scanned again. Same language. Same uncertainty. But tone across outlets would be diverging now, some minimizing, some escalating. That meant Julian's countermeasures were active. Phone out. On. Maya was already midstream. Maya, he issued client letter. Maya, claims robust liquidity. Maya, blames temporary settlement timing. Maya, partners forced to echo. Maya, market stabilizing slightly. Maya, he's fighting back. Of course he was. Julian never ceded ground. He redefined it. I paced the tiny room, mind-mapping response trees. If his reassurance held, panic could stall. I needed doubt to outpace confidence, but not explode yet. Controlled contest. I typed, obtain letter. Leak selectively to denied clients only. Maya, weaponize reassurance. Brutal. Yes. Because nothing enrages excluded stakeholders like promises others receive. I added, trigger comparison, who got funds versus who didn't. Maya, spreadsheet already building. I smiled faintly. That was why I chose her. I powered the phone down and leaned against the wall. Across Manhattan, Julian would be delivering calm, voice steady, posture exact, projecting inevitability restored. Clients on calls hearing the old authority. Some believing. But the denied ones? They'd read his letter side by side with their empty accounts. Cognitive dissonance detonates trust faster than loss. I slid down to sit on the floor, Carla's grocery bag beside me. Beans, bread, coffee. Real kindness from a woman who believed I'd been destroyed by the man now fighting for his empire. Layers of irony thick enough to taste. I picked up the bread, tore a piece, chewed slowly. Optics complete. Reality elsewhere. Somewhere above the skyline, boardrooms were lit late. Lawyers dialing. Analysts writing notes. Julian Croft deploying every countermeasure he knew: communication, authority, reassurance. He'd think this was the turning point. Stabilization beginning. He wouldn't know that his own letter, his own words, were about to become the next fracture line. Because the most effective way to break a system isn't attack. It's make it contradict itself. I stood and set the grocery bag on the dresser carefully, like treasure. Then I turned off the light and lay in darkness, listening to the building settle. Across the river, his tower still glowed. But tonight, for the first time, the light inside it wasn't certainty. It was strain. By morning, the letter had done exactly what I knew it would. It had split his world in two. I was at the deli counter again, officially on a trial shift now, apron tied crooked, hair shoved under a cap that smelled faintly of fryer oil, when the owner's tablet pinged with a news alert. He tapped it absently while counting change. "Finance guy's still messed up," he muttered. I didn't look up. "Yeah?" He rotated the screen toward me without thinking. "See? Says some clients got paid, some didn't. That ain't good." I let my eyes drift to it, then flinch away. "I don't really follow that stuff." "Thought your ex was big shot," he said, not unkindly. I gave a small, brittle laugh. "Was?" He nodded, satisfied with the narrative symmetry. Powerful man falls, discarded wife struggles. Moral balance restored. But the article headline mattered more than his tone. Client discrepancies emerge after Croft Capital Assurance letter. There it was, the contradiction externalized. Julian's promise of robust liquidity now publicly juxtaposed with selective payouts. Not rumor. Not inference. Evidence. I finished the shift, hands moving automatically, mind racing ahead. If media had picked up discrepancies, internal fractures would be widening fast. Partners would question messaging. CFO authority would rise. Julian's absolute control myth would erode. Perfect phase transition. Back in my room, door locked, phone on. Maya's messages were a cascade of fracture data. Maya, denied clients furious at letter. Maya, too threatening legal. Maya, partner group split 4-3 on Julian versus CFO. Maya, internal blame emails circulating. Maya, one partner hinted leadership misstatement. Maya, you're winning. I stared at that last line. Winning. I hadn't framed it that way, not consciously. This wasn't a game. It was architecture, dismantling a structure that had been built partly on me, then sealed without me. Still. Yes. The structure was failing. I typed, "Stabilize one denied client publicly. Let others remain exposed." Maya, you're alternating relief and pain. Yes. Keeps hope alive while trust dies. Maya, you're scary. I didn't answer. Instead, monitor partner 4-3 split. Identify swing. Because control tipping points live in individuals, not groups. One partner crossing would redefine power. I powered the phone down and sat still. Through the wall, someone played music too loud, bass vibrating faintly through plaster. The building carried on, oblivious. Down here, nothing had changed. Rent still due. Jobs still fragile. Lives still small and immediate. Across Manhattan, though, Croft Capital's internal map was redrawing. Julian's countermeasure, reassurance, had become contradiction. Contradiction becomes doubt. Doubt becomes defection. I stood and crossed to the mirror. The woman looking back still fit perfectly into the city's easiest story, abandoned spouse scraping by. No threat. No leverage. No relevance. I touched the bare ring finger again. 8 days ago, he'd slid divorce papers across polished wood believing he controlled every outcome, financial, reputational, emotional. Now his own partners were questioning his statements. And the world still thought I was the casualty. I let a slow breath out. Somewhere above, Julian would be in meetings stacked back to back, voice tightening, patience thinning. He'd sense loyalty shifting, not gone, but conditional. And for a man built on absolute authority, conditional loyalty feels like betrayal. He'd fight harder now. Which meant he'd expose more. Because pressure doesn't just break systems. It reveals them. I turned away from the mirror and lay back on the bed, hands behind my head, staring at the ceiling stain that now looked unmistakably like a crack. Not large. Not catastrophic. But spreading. The partner's name was Aaron Feld. I learned that at 1:07 p.m., sitting on the edge of my bed with the burner phone warm in my hand and sunlight cutting a narrow blade across the floor. Maya's message had arrived with a single line. Maya, swing equals Feld. Loyal to Julian historically. Hesitating now. I closed my eyes, reconstructing him from memory. Aaron Feld, early 50s, meticulous, numbers first, the kind of man who corrected grammar in emails and aligned coasters on conference tables. Not charismatic. Not visionary. But trusted, because he never exaggerated, never improvised, never deviated from provable fact. Julian's opposite in temperament. Which meant if Feld wavered, Julian's authority narrative fractured irreparably. I typed, "What's his exposure?" Maya, 2 denied clients tied to his portfolio. Both angry. Both citing letter. Perfect. I stood and began pacing the tiny room, mapping leverage paths. Feld wouldn't respond to panic or rumor. He'd respond to discrepancy, numbers not matching statements. Integrity gaps. I typed, "Feed Feld precise comparison, his clients versus paid clients." No commentary. Maya, direct? Anonymous but credible. Timestamp data only. Because Feld trusted data over people. Let the numbers indict Julian without voice attached. Maya, on it. I powered the phone down and leaned both hands on the dresser, staring at my reflection. Somewhere across Manhattan, Aaron Feld was likely sitting in a glass office reviewing liquidity spreadsheets, the letter open beside them. His mind, the careful, rule-bound kind, would be colliding with contradiction. Julian says robust. My clients unpaid. Others paid. Data versus leader. For men like Feld, that conflict isn't political. It's moral. I exhaled slowly. This was the pivot. Not collapse. Not exposure. Realignment. If Feld crossed from Julian's camp to CFO's, the partner split would flip. Authority would dilute. Julian would become one voice among several. From there, erosion accelerates. I moved to the window slit and looked out at the narrow slice of sky. A plane crossed silently, far above the city's noise. Movement unseen from the ground. Exactly how power shifts. A knock sounded down the hall, someone else's door. Laughter followed. Life continuing. My cover intact. I returned to the bed and pulled Carla's grocery coffee into my hands, inhaling the cheap, burnt smell. Ground-level existence, perfectly ordinary. And yet. Miles away, a single email would soon land in Aaron Feld's inbox, data tables clean, timestamps irrefutable, payout discrepancies mapped to the very letter Julian had signed. No accusation. No narrative. Just fact. Fact is the most dangerous weapon against belief. I sipped the coffee and sat in silence, letting time do what pressure alone cannot, force decision. Because Feld wouldn't move instantly. He'd verify. Cross-check. Reconcile. His mind would resist betrayal of a leader he'd trusted for decades. But numbers don't soften. They either align or they don't. And they didn't. My phone stayed dark for 40 minutes. Then it vibrated once. On. Maya, Feld requested emergency partner reconvene. Maya, he cited material inconsistency. Maya, split now 4-4 pending CFO. Maya, Julian furious. Maya, you just cracked command. I closed my eyes. There it was. Not downfall. Not ruin. Command fracture. The moment a hierarchy stops being singular. I typed only, hold. No new pressure. Because after a fracture, the worst mistake is pushing too soon. Let them destabilize themselves. Maya, you're terrifyingly patient. I powered the phone off without replying. Across Manhattan, Aaron Feld would be walking into a conference room carrying printed tables, voice steady, conscience aligned with data. Julian across from him, eyes cold, authority challenged for the first time internally. And neither of them would think of me. Not the ex-wife in a rented room drinking donated coffee. Not the woman who pawned her ring. Not the one who had just shifted the balance of power inside Croft Capital with a single anonymous dataset. I lay back slowly on the mattress, staring at the ceiling crack. It had definitely grown. The meeting lasted 3 hours. I knew because Maya's update stopped the moment Aaron Feld walked into that conference room, and didn't resume until 4:26 p.m., when my burner lit up with a cascade so dense it felt like static. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I finished wiping down the deli counter, hands moving in small circles, body steady while anticipation hummed underneath like a live wire. The owner counted the register. Oil popped in the fryer. Outside, buses sighed at the curb. Ordinary time. The most dangerous kind. Because somewhere across Manhattan, the structure I'd spent years mapping, and days stressing, was now under internal load beyond tolerance. I untied the apron, mumbled a goodbye, and stepped into late afternoon light. The city felt unchanged, horns, heat rising off pavement, people bent into their own urgencies. Only glass towers know when they're about to fail. I walked 3 blocks before pulling the phone from my pocket. On. Messages flooded the screen. Maya, it's done. Maya, Feld sided with CFO. Maya, vote now 5-4 against Julian control. Maya, emergency oversight committee formed. Maya, Julian authority formally limited. Maya, clients notified of governance realignment. Maya, he's not in command anymore. I stopped on the sidewalk. Noise flowed around me, footsteps, traffic, someone laughing too loud, but inside, everything went still. Not triumph. Not relief. Recognition. The breakpoint. In structural terms, it's the instant load shifts irreversibly from primary support to secondary frame. The building still stands. Externally intact. But the original architecture is gone. Julian Croft still had a firm. But it was no longer his. I typed slowly, status? Maya, he's contained but furious. Fighting narrative. Maya, but board authority now shared. Maya, market reading as leadership failure, not liquidity event. Maya, you didn't just hurt him. You replaced him ***. I stared at that last line. Replaced. I powered the phone off and slipped it away. Then I kept walking, because movement hides shock better than stillness. Past storefronts. Past strangers. Past reflections of myself in dark glass, hoodie, tote, worn shoes. Still invisible. Still dismissed. Across the river, though, Julian's reflection had changed permanently. For 20 years he'd been singular authority, Croft equals control. Croft equals certainty. Now? Croft equals dispute. Doubt. Limitation. I reached my building and climbed the stairs slowly. Carla called from her doorway, "You here? That ex of yours on TV again." They saying partners took over. I let my face crumple on cue. "I don't want to know," I whispered. She nodded fiercely. "Serves him right." I went inside my room and closed the door. Mask gone. I sat on the bed and let the silence settle. 8 days ago, he'd handed me divorce papers believing he was ending variables, removing complication, sealing outcomes, preserving power. Today, his own partners had voted to remove his unilateral control. He still had wealth. He still had reputation fragments. But the thing he valued most, The thing he'd always protected above marriage, loyalty, even truth. Authority. Was broken. Not publicly destroyed. But internally replaced. I lay back on the mattress, staring at the ceiling crack that now clearly split the stain in two. Breakpoint doesn't mean collapse. It means inevitability has changed sides. And somewhere in a glass conference room above Manhattan, Julian Croft was realizing something for the first time in his adult life. He could not command what happened next. The news cycle moved on in less than 48 hours. It always does. A merger rumor in tech displaced Croft Capital from headlines. Markets found a fresher anxiety. Analysts redirected language toward whatever flickered newest on their screens. By the 10th day after the vote, Julian's firm had settled into a new narrative: governance restructuring following liquidity strain. Controlled wording. Neutral tone. History already smoothing the fracture. Down here, nothing had changed at all. I still woke to pipes knocking and someone's radio bleeding through the wall. I still walked to the deli before sunrise, tied on the apron, fumbled with coins like someone relearning survival. Carla still knocked sometimes with leftovers. The building still held me in its quiet category. Divorced. Broke. Harmless. Perfect. Because the most dangerous phase isn't breakage. It's after. I finished my shift that morning and stepped outside into winter sunlight that felt thin but clean. The city carried on in its endless, indifferent motion. Taxis. Steam grates. People who would never know how close glass towers had come to collapse. Or who had tilted them. I walked to the river. It wasn't far, 20 minutes through blocks that shifted from industrial to polished. Brick gave way to steel. Laundry lines to mirrored facades. By the time I reached the waterfront, Croft Capital's tower stood clear across the water, its surface catching pale sky like nothing had ever touched it. Externally intact. Internally altered forever. I leaned on the railing and watched light move across its windows. Somewhere inside, Julian still worked. Still argued. Still projected certainty. But now every decision passed through committee. Every statement filtered. Every move observed. Authority redistributed. Control diluted. Irreversible. I took a slow breath. This was the moment people imagine revenge stories end, with confrontation, confession, victory declared. But real structural shifts don't announce themselves. They settle. They normalize. They become the new baseline everyone forgets was once different. I turned from the water and sat on a bench facing both worlds at once, the skyline ahead, the low brick neighborhood behind. Past and present sharing a horizon. In my pocket, the burner phone rested silent. No new instructions needed. No further pressure required. The architecture had already been changed. Julian Croft had lost the one thing he believed indivisible. And the world believed markets had done it. Or partners. Or circumstance. No one believed the woman who pawned her ring had anything to do with it. I watched the tower a while longer, then reached into my tote and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside were the real rings. The originals. Cold diamonds catching light. I hadn't looked at them since the night before I left. I rolled them in my palm, feeling their weight, the years they'd represented, the life they'd symbolized, the leverage they'd quietly funded. Marriage, like finance, is built on trust flows. Once diverted, structures change. I slipped them back into the pouch. I didn't need them. I didn't need proof. Because power, once exercised successfully from invisibility, never needs acknowledgement. I stood and started back toward the neighborhood. Behind me, Croft Capital's tower gleamed exactly as before, no cracks, no scars, no sign of the shift that had redefined it. Ahead, my building waited, peeling paint, narrow stairs, Carla's knock, deli shifts, the story everyone believed. Discarded wife. Financial ruin. Quiet survival. I walked into it easily, like a coat that fit. And somewhere above Manhattan, in a boardroom that no longer belonged solely to him, Julian Croft was living inside a reality he couldn't control. Built by the one variable he'd removed. The woman no one saw.